So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from around the world. My name is Scott Moyer, and I'm excited to host this event, which we call Cultivate. I'm a portfolio director for a company called Collaborative Solutions. We'll tell you a little bit about ourselves in just a moment. On behalf of the company, we are thrilled to have some folks all across the globe attending this session, and we're even more thrilled to have a couple of finance leaders from some healthcare companies, Christiana Care and Communicare. They are going to be going through today some of the challenges they've faced, some of the opportunities they've got going forward in developing their finance transformation journey with Workday as a platform. The whole intent of this discussion is to allow folks who are in their journey, maybe starting your journey, thinking about Workday as a platform in the healthcare space, to really learn from folks who are either in the middle of such a journey or who have already done so, learn some of the things they've learned and maybe help you on your way, avoid some obstacles, think around the corner a bit, just really get a taste for what it's like and how you would integrate all of your systems and processes in the finance transformation journey. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please know everyone on the call is on mute for now. We want you to listen in to the panelists and think through some of the challenges they're discussing. Write down your questions. We will have a Q&A period towards the end here, so be prepared for that. This session is being recorded and will be distributed after the session, and if there are any questions we miss during the panel here, we will definitely get back to you. So before we get started, we need to have a little message from our sponsor, a little commercial, just like the presidential debates, we have to do that. So we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, Collaborative Solutions, and to do that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Michael Cleary, who is a regional manager of healthcare. So Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. So as Scott mentioned, just a little bit more about our firm, Collaborative Solutions, before we get into the discussion. So Collaborative Solutions was founded in 2003 and became a Workday deployment partner in 2007. We're the longest tenured partner in the Workday ecosystem. Collaborative is not only a system implementer of Workday, but a full service HR and finance transformation consultancy. So we've got a deep ProSci certified change management practice and a portfolio of strategic advisory services, as well as partnerships with several other solutions that fit into the Workday ecosystem that we use to add additional value for our clients on our projects. We've worked with over 800 unique customers at this point, including about 60 in the healthcare provider industry. Across that customer base, we've achieved 100% deployment success and 98% customer satisfaction metrics. Excuse me. And within the healthcare industry, we were selected as the phase 1 deployment partner for 25% of all net new Workday healthcare projects in 2019. So we have a pretty good footprint in the industry that we're talking about today. We've had great success recently with our supply chain management practice, which I know is a big focus area for any healthcare organization considering Workday and for Workday or for healthcare finance leadership. So I wanted to mention that on the call today. We've completed 7 recent Workday supply chain go lives and have more supply chain product leads than any other partner in the ecosystem. I mentioned we're a partner of Workday's. We're also been a full platform customer of Workday's for about 12 years. So we run our business on the platform as well as deploy it. So we see things from both perspectives. And finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that we're known for our culture here at Collaborative. We know that happy consultants make for happy customers and successful projects. So we have a big focus on that here. That's really important to us. We've won several workplace awards recently from Great Places to Work, Consulting Magazine, Fortune Magazine, and some others. So we really pride ourselves on being the employer of choice in the Workday ecosystem, and that shows with some of the accolades we received recently. And then I think Scott's going to take it over now and go through the agenda.
Yep, thanks, Michael. So pretty simple, straightforward approach today. We'll do some introductions. We're going to find out a little bit about our panelists. Bonnie and Rob are going to talk about their companies, a little bit about their journey. I always find it interesting in the finance executive space to hear how people got to where they are. So we're going to ask them to spend a little bit of time on their background, their companies, and then we'll get right into a panel discussion. And it's a fairly open dialogue. This is meant to be a conversation about what keeps people up at night. That's what we're calling working the night shift. It's based on an old saying, an old question that lots of salespeople for years have talked about when they meet new customers. What keeps you up at night? Well, my contention, having been a CFO, is that there's lots that keeps people up at night in that space, or in a financial executive space, and particularly in the times we're in currently. So we want to really start with that. The idea is using what keeps people up at night in the finance space and healthcare as a starting point to then take the journey back into, well, how do you solve for that? How do you keep those things top of mind with your systems and processes, Workday being a core component of that. So we'll have the panel discussion, and as we mentioned, we will then turn this over to Michael, who will be taking your questions and answers. We will try to get to as many as we can, and that'll be the last 15 minutes or so of today. So again, this is meant to be a light discussion. We're going to have some fun. We're going to ask some tough questions and some fun questions, but before we do all that, let's turn it over to a couple of introductions. So I'm Scott Moyer. I'm Portfolio Director here at Collaborative. My responsibility is really the facilitator today. I bring the finance functional lens to the table. Michael Cleary, who is in our healthcare group, brings more of the healthcare background. He's more of an expert, subject matter expert for us on that. And then thrilled to introduce our two panelists today. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves in more detail, but we've got Rob Shoemaker, who's the VP and CFO of Communicare, as well as Bonnie Graham, SVP of Finance, ChristianaCare, customers of ours. And before we let you introduce yourself, just Bonnie and Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that our attendees are going to get a lot out of this, and we're very much looking forward to that. So I think we're going to start with Rob, and if we go to the next slide, Rob, if you don't mind, just tell us about yourself a little bit. How'd you get here? Your journey, and we'll flash on the screen here for those at home that want to learn a little bit about Communicare. Rob, if you would just tell us about how you got to where you are, your company, what kind of healthcare company is it, and then maybe touch on the challenges that you guys have, the key challenge that brought you to Workday, if you would. Thanks,
sure.
Rob.
Thanks for having me, Rob Shoemaker. Just a little bit about myself. I got my undergrad in accounting at Boston College and my MBA at Xavier University. Live in Cincinnati. I started my career in public accounting at E&Y. After I left public, I spent 9 years at an acute care hospital system in Cincinnati before spending 2 years in a leadership position at a pediatric hospital. And I've been at Communicare for almost 2 years now. So Communicare is a privately held company, and we began in 1984. We currently operate in 7 states. We are as far as west as Missouri, and then as far east as the Baltimore, DC area. We've experienced a lot of growth here in the past 3 to 4 years, and our bread and butter and our main business is the skilled nursing facilities. In addition, we have a behavioral health line, long-term care and assisted living communities, as well as independent living communities, and we also own and operate an LTAC. We have about 90 locations across the 7 states, and now about 11,000 employees. And from a Workday perspective, Collaborative has been assisting us for the last year on our go live, which is 1/1 of 20. We're going full suite go live on HCM and financials. And we're really looking forward to replacing a lot of our manual processes and switching over to employee and a manager self-service.
Great, thanks, Rob. Usually we do ladies first, but for some reason we've reversed it this time. Bonnie, if you will.
That's okay. That's okay. The one thing I noticed is we both have care in our names, in our companies as a second word. I thought that was really interesting. But I'm Bonnie Graham, and I work at ChristianaCare. Recently went to ChristianaCare right before COVID started, so it's been a really interesting few months for me. But how did I get there? So I went to Clemson, and I really just say that because I think they're 4-0 and maybe in first place or something like that. I follow it too much, but I got a few texts over the weekend about Clemson. So anyway, but I majored in accounting, and I have my CPA, and started in healthcare in the hospital. I started in the for-profit industry, and I worked for UHS, which is one of the largest for-profit healthcare companies, and went to several hospitals that they own and worked at the corporate office when I ended there. And I always tell everybody I learned discipline and fundamentals there for sure. And then when I left there, I went into the non-for-profit space. UHS brought me up to Pennsylvania. I live in Pennsylvania, and I worked for a local non-for-profit system here for about 8.5 years, and then moved to Christiana Care in November. So I haven't been there that long, and but I certainly have hit the ground running. Was there about 3 months. We did a fairly good sized joint venture with the urgent care company. We did a $360 million bond deal in the couple months I was there, and we bought a health system in Maryland. So we did all that, and as I was, completing most of that, March hit, and we all know the story from there. So been pretty focused on that. Christiana Care is located in Delaware. It's about a $1.9 billion net revenue health system, full service, large health system, trauma, teaching program. And I think, and we're in Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and now Maryland. We had services there, but now we have a health system there as well. And the Workday journey at Christiana started, I think, about 5 years ago. They transitioned all of the HR and accounting ledger platforms. AP, payroll are on Workday, and they're pretty settled. We just rolled out this year the new adaptive budgeting system that Workday has. That was new for us. So we went off our old budgeting system. So we did that right in the middle, trying to figure out budgets with COVID, changing everything about budgets. And we are getting ready we were going to launch the supply chain, which you touched on, Michael, and I didn't know that you had one of the largest practices. So it's interesting to learn. And then we put that behind. We are going to integrate our new health system in first to the HR and accounting platform, which really helps us from logistics of the HR management. So we are speeding that up, and then we'll go back to implementing the supply chain. So that's a little about me and where we are.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, let's get to the core of our conversation then. So in the panel discussion, like we said, this is going to be fairly informal. We are really targeting folks and making sure that our audience is getting what they need out of this, which is learning from folks who have been there or who are going through it. So please keep in mind those questions and put them in the chat box, and we will get to those in about 30 minutes or so. Before we get started, I think I mentioned this at the beginning. Our hypothesis at Collaborative is we should start with the end in mind. So it's not just about replacing a system. It's about what value do you get and do you drive for your stakeholders and your shareholders? And how do you start with that value and work backwards into the systems and processes you need? We believe, because Workday is all we do, that Workday can be a fundamental platform for that. Obviously, it's what we do. But we need to think broadly about how do you drive value and what are the big concerns that CFOs have, thinking about, for example, return on investment. How do you maximize revenue, cut costs with supply chain as an example? Bonnie mentioned that. And then, even Bonnie was talking about a capital piece, right? How do you allocate your capital accordingly? Those would be the elements of shareholder value, economic value, return on investment. So we are focusing on starting with the end in mind and working backwards through what reporting do you need, what analytics do you need to drive that business to meet those needs, and then backwards into what systems and processes. And finally, the who, right? So the why is how do we drive value The what is the systems, processes, and analytics, and then the how would be the systems, I should say. But the who is the real question, right? How do you adopt it? How do you get everybody in the organization to adopt something like a Workday, which is a little different system than people are used to? So there's the who, the what, the where, the how, the when, right? All the questions you need to ask around this. So all that being said, starting with the end in mind, how do you drive value? How do you get people to adopt a new system? We want to think about a hypothesis of what are the big rocks in your business? What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? Forward thinking, backwards thinking, accounting, P&A, capital allocation, you name it. What are those big topics? So as we go into the next slide, this is really the fundamental question, and we will be bouncing around this. But so for Bonnie and Rob, I'll let either one of you go first. But just thinking about what keeps you up at night. What is kind of the big industry or corporate challenge that you're facing right now that's kind of top of mind for you? Bonnie, you want to go first? We'll do ladies first now.
Sure. So I think something that we've been working a lot on, of course, coming out of the last few months, is changing our approach to budgeting and forecasting. And I think keeping the end in mind with what you said is, for me, is really tying in these new methodologies into full service reporting that can project our capital needs, the 5-year plan, and roll it all forward. So, two things really specific is that we've switched our model of budgeting as we went up on a new platform to forecasting quarterly as well. And so, that was a big shift in the middle of, flying that plane in COVID. But also the reporting, we talked a lot about the reporting. So I think around a lot of what I see in Workday is how to make the reporting what we need. And also, I'll throw out the dynamic that Workday has its own reporting, and their new budgeting system, Adaptive, has its own reporting. And so we're still waiting to see, how does that all culminate together to what, we get what we need to be able to go to the boards and so forth with our budgeting and not have to do so much manipulation to prepare. So, I mean, that has been a big process we've been involved in, and I'm trying to work through that end presentation.
So I guess maybe follow-up, Bonnie, would be if you're sitting in the audience and you're contemplating Adaptive/Workday as a replacement for your forward-looking budgeting, forecasting, planning systems, what big lesson did you learn from that will help me going forward that I can think and get ahead of before I start the journey?
Well, the one thing that we learned, and I have to say from my perspective, I was pleasantly amazed almost, is that we were able to roll a forecast out of Adaptive. And what I mean is down to the detail cost center level. So we were able to project a quarter and be able to use Adaptive to project either, it's two ways. So the expenses were able to roll forward based on the months that we wanted to use and roll at a detail level, which is pretty impressive. And then the net revenue, of course, we're using our cost system and some other projection models, but bringing that in and being able to roll that out as well. I was pleasantly surprised that we were able to do it, and we were able to do it in the time we did. So I give a lot of shout out to the team that was working on that. So I think that the product has a lot of viability for us. And then as we learned, I mean, we were brand new. It was the first time we budgeted on that system, and we did complete our full budget, but then we switched, so we're holding that there, and then also forecasting. And so that gives me a lot of hope that the tool will be, very beneficial. I think the other thing is how it integrates back and forth to the ledger to get the information when we close. So I think there'll be good things to come from that.
That's actually a follow-up for you. Have you noticed, you mentioned level of detail in the forecasting. Are you able to see that in your into actual analysis that you're getting apples to apples, where you have enough detail to be able to drive down into the, into the journals or what have you, or invoices.
Mm-hmm.
Is that happening as well, or is there room for improvement there?
We have detailed level at the cost center, and maybe not the, but at a departmental budget. So I think that's really good. I would say if a department manager was here, they'd say they're struggling, and that's only because we made a forecast at a pretty high level assumption, which is different than the budget that they prepared. So what we are working through is looking at prior years. So we're having to work on ways to explain the variances because things have changed rapidly. So that's where the struggle's been, but that has nothing really to do with the system. That's just a mere product of the environment we're living in. But it is detailed. Is that a good go forward method to do it always at the detail level? I'm not so sure, but it is where we are today and it works. So if we can perfect it, we'll probably keep doing that.
So channeling my best Chris Wallace here, Rob, any response to her point about forecasting, and then we can go on to what your top challenges are. Any comments on it?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I mean, likewise, we're obviously not live yet, but that's something we're looking forward to, is getting into adaptive as well. I mean, currently we have a pretty manual budgeting process. So what's been great working on the Workday project and working with collaborative is that we had multiple general ledgers, and we're combining that all into one. So that will simplify our processes once we're live as well, and we're going to be able to close down or shorten our close cycle by a couple of days as well. So we're really looking forward to getting away from manual processes, manual reporting, and getting into accurate and more timely data.
Great. So Rob, any answer to the question? So what keeps you up at night? What is your top challenge that you have top of mind as you go into this season of Workday?
Yeah, we're really looking forward on. It's funny the finance guys talking about the HCM side, but we're really looking forward to getting the HCM module stood up, because we think that we can really leverage a lot of that data and a lot of those processes to prevent burnout and turnover. We have a high turnover industry, and anything we can do to keep our good employees is great, especially in the world now that we're living in with COVID. We want our workers to be safe and not get burned out. So a lot of that data will live in Workday and will be available to us at the touch of a button, and we'll be able to identify those areas of risk and really work towards improving that.
So systems aside, Rob, for just a second, let's take Workday out of the mix. Just thinking about your day to day, there's regulatory issues. I always say that the CFO or SVP of finance role is the hardest job in the company, because you've got tons of stakeholders with competing interests. You've got to worry about capital preservation, forecasting. You've got to worry about regulatory changes, ACA. I mean, there's a lot on your plate. What's top of mind for you right now?
Well, in relation to COVID, especially, and you mentioned the regulatory requirements are obviously very difficult. For us, we're in 7 different states, so each state looks different. Each location might be different, and just from a reporting standpoint and what we need to do in those areas. So that's obviously a top of mind, and obviously census is very important to us as well, making sure that we keep our census high and we're taking the best care of our patients and residents that we can.
As someone who's not that familiar with the healthcare industry, I would just ask the follow-up question. When you say census, can you describe what you mean and what the challenge is?
So census for us in the long-term care side is basically having our beds filled, just like in the hospital setting. And obviously that, enables us to optimize our staffing levels and run an efficient operation. So that's really top of mind for us.
On that note, so you mentioned COVID and you mentioned, what I think of as sort of bed utilization or capacity utilization, right? When you think about going forward, what has been the impact on both of your businesses financially of having, the possibility that COVID just takes over the hospital and now you've got, you've got different profit streams, different revenue streams. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And then follow up would be, how do you build systems around that or reporting around that to solve that problem?
Sure. So again, I'm sure same with Bonnie. I mean, we felt our census drop, obviously, because of we had community admissions slowed down, as well as the hospital admissions when when surgeries basically stopped, hips stopped getting replaced and all. That kind of was a downstream effect to us as well. So it's really building back up that census and those relationships. That's the biggest thing for us, I would say.
Bonnie?
Yeah, so I think that, we have been very focused, I mean, probably going back to some of your other, questions, but we've been very focused on liquidity, on our reporting requirements, as you mentioned, and making sure that we're meeting all those requirements and filing for everything that we can file. So we have a daily huddle. There's probably 20 participants. We have finance, we have a government affairs team, reimbursement, our internal audit's been helping us. And we met daily, and we meet a little less often now, but at least once a week, it's on the calendar. So we focus on these things, and I think, we are seeing volume back. I think most health systems across the country are in the high 90s. There's still a little lag on the outpatient side. So, trying to figure out, is that the new normal, or is it just there's still people out there hesitant to come to the hospital? So watching our volumes, ensuring that we are watching, again, our liquidity and tracking with that. And then the CARES Act requirements. We have, and most people do, I think it's over 150 daily inputs into the CMS website that we have to meet. And if we don't, I guess they start to, pay you your Medicare fees, but or you're in bad standing. So, there is a lot going on right now. I think one of the things, maybe to answer your question, like top of mind and something we've been focused on, is because all this is so important, health systems are looking at their cost structures and cost management, right? So one of the things, where Workday comes into play is the information, again, and the reporting you can get out of it for these types of analytics. And, maybe the HR system will help you with better measurement of your FTEs and other, aspects. But if you're not on payroll, payroll reporting and all that information is important to understanding your costs in the health system. So that is something else that we're really focused on. And I did want to point out that, and I was not there, but I will give huge kudos. So for Christiana Care Main Hospital, after they launched, they're at a 5-day close. Rob mentioned that, so I thought I would tell you, like, that really, and that's the cost reduction, right? Because you're not in that perpetual close cycle. I find that amazing. But there was a lot of automation done on the accounting side. And so we are looking very forward to getting our new acquisition in, because it'll help us with that close, because they're behind our schedule now. And we manually have to bring them into work, into consolidations at the moment. So, so I think how we utilize the system to help us manage, these, as you say, regulatory and also operating indicators is really important to us.
Bonnie, you just threw out something I think is worth double clicking on for a second, which is, the whole justification of programs, right? If you're putting in a system or revising a process like Workday or any transformation, right? You need to buy it. And often the justification is in the finance department around cutting the number of days of close, the transactional side. You really want to get your costs out. But more and more, we're seeing that justification has to be broader, and that the information you're getting helps you cut costs in the organization operationally. So if either of you could talk about, as you thought about, making an investment in a Workday or other systems, how you've been able to come up with the ROI for that with the business. And I'll throw out a term that you already mentioned, which is supply chain, which kind of gets to the real cost of goods sold, real expense side. And of course, there's always the human capital side as well. So either one of you want to take that one in terms of how you look at ROI on a project like that.
Sure, I can start with that. Yeah, when we were doing our evaluation, we really looked at the hard cost, the cost of what systems we currently had in place and how disparate they were, and they didn't talk to each other, and really shied away from this quote soft costs. So when we were pitching the Workday idea, we didn't necessarily say we were going to save all these FTEs, but I think we'll get more efficient and more timely with our information and data, and that will allow us to be much more nimble and quick with our decision making. We didn't have any true integrations, many disparate systems, and we're kind of on the tail end of our implementation, and we're getting pretty excited because we're actually seeing our data within Workday that Collaborative has helped us out with, and we're really excited that we're going to be able to manage the day-to-day operations, whether it be approvals for AP, instead of them being signed off by hand, we're going to have them scanned and in Workday, and electronic approvals throughout the organization. So, I mean, it's really exciting for us to see the change that's going to happen within our organization.
Bonnie, you have 30 seconds to follow up. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
I'm doing good at not interrupting too. I know.
Very good.
So, but that's hard for me sometimes. No, yeah, I would say that I do know in our payroll and AP area specifically, there has been a reduction, I'll say, in paper. They are, completely paperless. And so there's a cost to that, right? And a savings. And I know that the payroll department, some of it I think is very manager focused, and we had a real drive and push to make sure we were using the automation. But we've also been able to streamline, I believe, the staffing in that area too, with the elimination of paper and the elimination or the addition of some automation that Workday provided. And I do think that for us, bringing up the supply chain side, we do use AP, but we're not talking. Will bring, maximize those efficiencies for us. So I'm sure we can learn from some of the other participants or individuals who've gone through that already, and how we can maximize the use of Workday for that too.
Well, you both hit on this. One justification is the cost out of the cycles, like closing the books, AP, invoicing, and what I would refer to as the bottom of the triangle, the transactional side. As you move up the value chain of finance and you think about the artificial intelligence and the analytic capability and the forward-looking scenario planning kind of things, maybe if you could touch a little bit on that as you've looked at Workday and other systems. You already talked, Bonnie, a little bit about COVID and about Adaptive helping you with scenario planning. Are there other industry or key topics, things that quote unquote keep you up at night that you could see using your Adaptive systems or your Workday systems to start getting ahead of things in the future? So thinking about the future, about analytics, about more deep diving into the the why behind the what. Any thoughts there? Thinking about scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I can. Yeah, I think that our biggest untapped piece of the system is the reporting and analytics. Mm-hmm. I would say, and I'm a newcomer, but I'd say we implemented, we have good reporting. We maybe optimized a little bit, but I think we have the ability to take it to the next level. And I think that's a project on our horizon. I also think with the launch of Adaptive, it comes with its own reporting tool. And so working with Workday, they still have some planning to decide which reporting package will be their ultimate or how they'll be, integrated. But I think when they do, there'll be great power, because what I see is on the Adaptive side, we are very agile at being able to run more detailed reports to review the variances. So you tend to want to use Adaptive for some of that analytic work that we're talking about. Just need to make sure, you have a lot of reporting going on now. So what reports are the reports coming out of finance? Which one, right? So I think that's where our greatest optimization will come. And I'm going to throw out there, the other thing I've learned, and I'm really looking forward to being able to use, is that Adaptive reporting can also have, I guess, like a scheduled way to produce graphical slides and PDFs and so forth. And I think that as soon as you close, if you have those built, that is a really cool way to produce your board packets without manually having to do that. So that is something I'm looking forward to learning how to do. And we're working on that, like someone's, and I'm not sure if it's ready, if it's fully baked, but that is, to me, saves time.
On a side note, in a former life, I would spend 80 hours a week during the board month with PowerPoint, Excel, manual stuff, staying up every night, just trying a 40-page board package done in Microsoft. And so the interface between Microsoft and Adaptive is really slick. And once you get a report you like, you just virtually press a couple of buttons and it repopulates and the numbers are there. So, it just takes a whole lot of manual effort out of the finance team.
That's my goal.
Yeah, not to be
because I'm with you.
But it's nice. Spent a lot of time staying up late at night trying to do that stuff manually. Rob, anything to add on that topic?
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of timely for us because we're kind of in the tail end of building all our reports right now, and we're excited to, as mentioned, we're going to be doing Adaptive into phase 2, but also into phase 2 where we'll be looking at Prism and what opportunities that can bring us from a data standpoint, and bringing in data from some of our outside systems as well. And we're excited about that. But the automation of reporting is really exciting for us. One of our days of close is currently basically manually putting together those reports for the various stakeholders and operations folks. So it literally becomes a push of a button once we're live on Workday. So that will save time and energy on a monthly basis as well for us.
Great, outstanding. Switching topics a little bit, we've talked about some of the industry challenges, things that keep you up at night. As you look forward into the future, and the topic that we've all heard a lot lately, probably for a while now, is finance transformation, whatever that means for you, right? So thinking about kind of the people, process, technology of your organizations, what are you all doing beyond the system to kind of get ahead of the next generation of workers, and building out what does that future of finance look like for you? Technology is obviously a key component of that, but what are some other elements of transforming your teams that are on top of mind? Or how are you thinking that through? Either one of you can answer that. Rob, maybe you first.
Sure. So just point of clarification. So you're talking about what we're doing within the finance department?
Yeah. And so the workforce of the future within the finance department, how are you thinking about the personnel challenges, keeping next generation engaged, and the talent, the war on talent, and just there's a technology piece. Everyone thinks if you buy the technology, all of a sudden you're transformed, right? There's a whole lot more to it to that. And I just wanted you to maybe think add to that?
Yeah, a couple of points. And Michael mentioned the change management aspect of it. So we're going to be really changing how all of our employees live on the business side of things on a day-to-day basis. So that's first and foremost to us, to make sure we train them properly for the Workday conversion, and then as new people come into the organization, that they get proper training too. So Collaborative's done a great job of building out job aids and trainings and videos on how certain roles within our organization will change and how their day-to-day lives will be once we're live on Workday. So I think preparing those materials to make sure that our employees are informed and understand how that will work is definitely important, so they're not flying blind. Another thing is that a lot of jobs are going to change, especially on the finance side. For instance, payroll was mentioned earlier. We have a lot of manual payroll processes right now. That's going to turn more into analysis instead of data entry type roles. So it's really, people are going to have to think differently on a day-to-day basis, and we have to make sure that we're providing them with the tools and the knowledge in order to do that.
Absolutely. Bonnie, any follow-up to that? And I'm thinking specifically the term change management, for those who are listening in that have not started a project, how important is it to you?
It is, and so I do, it was a big project at Christiana when they launched Workday, and I agree with the change management. I would say in the core accounting group, I believe 50% either, decided it was time to retire or moved on because of the challenges that the technology, it's a big change from an old school, just ledger type accounting. So that is real and does happen. What made me think of when you brought this up was the remote workforce of the future, the dynamics of that. And we, so being paper versus non-paper, so I'll tell you, previous lives, signed everything. I mean, I had the photocopier box brought into my office of like things to sign, especially when we had large projects going on. There's everything electronic at Christiana Care and Workday, so there is no paper shuffling through the office. So being able to be remote, that absolutely facilitates that, the automation within inside of Workday. We popped up, the entire accounting office has been remote since day one, 100%. They haven't even stepped in the office, not for one thing. The entire budget process was done remotely in Workday, and AP and payroll are all remote. A couple do go in, full disclosure, some like to go in. We do have mail, so there is that. And payroll really only needs to go in on like one day during pay period. We still have a few manual tasks, which is our own issue, but we do. But we are 98% remote. And I do believe in my previous lives that would not be able to be possible because of you just have to be there to sign stuff. So I think thinking through other ways for remote and signatures when you do need, like making sure you have the softwares and if there's anything to be built in. I think our largest challenge with having to sign stuff is more the banking, the investment side of the portfolio and treasury. They require signatures. But otherwise, I think the workforce of the future, to be able to hire, you're going to have to be able to provide some remote capabilities.
In a prior life, we did a survey of millennials, and 75% said they do not want to come into an office. Just imagine what that does in terms of expanding your pool of potential assets and human capital if you have the ability to do that. Thank you, guys. I think we're about 15 minutes before the hour, so I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Michael. And Michael is going to do a time check and see if we have any Q&A from the audience. If not, we can certainly keep the ball rolling. But I thought I'd stop and let Michael let you jump in and see if there's any questions that have come in from the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So a couple questions have come in, and if you guys want to ask any, I guess, go to webinar bot on the right. There's a little question form if you want to add some more. First question is, what data do you wish you had access to instantly? So, Rob, do you want to maybe kick off a response on that answer?
Sure. For us right now, I would say payroll and basically staffing information. Our process for reporting out staffing metrics is pretty manual right now, and once we're live on Workday, all that should be manual in real time from an hours perspective. So that's what I would take right now.
How about you, Bonnie?
I think for me, it's how do we build dashboard or the reporting package to be accessed, in an easy fashion. So in some respects, although we have sophisticated reporting in Workday, there's, our package is still a couple of reports. You have to put it together. We haven't necessarily had that way to automate that. And I don't know if that comes with a dashboard or with a capability to book. I think that it's there. We have not used it. And I guess that's what I mean. I don't think we've done that second level optimization. And so we're talking about that now. That's what we need. Like, that's my next, we're working hard on that project of reporting.
Let me follow up on that quick, Michael, if you don't mind. So in regards to access to real-time information, are either of you considering moving towards, weekly P&Ls or more, data, real-time kind of daily looks at revenue indicators, so you're not waiting till 3 or 4 weeks after the close to find out you had a problem, right? So you're seeing in real time. Have either of you contemplated that with your management teams?
We have, and we are building some of that in Workday right now. We are going to utilize it basically AP spend versus budget on create dashboards around that on a as real-time basis as you can get in order to monitor and catch things ahead of time before the close cycle.
How about you, Bonnie?
So I think it's twofold. I think that we have the information, and we have weekly huddles, and we look at, I have a cash model, so we look at our revenue in, what's going out, and we're able to prepare that in a fairly automated fashion from Workday. They are working on trying to completely automate the template that we're using in that huddle now. And then secondly, for me, it really comes on the other side of the fence, which is in our product that the revenue cycle and billing uses, and looking at better dashboards for that volume indicators that you're talking about. But I'd say I think all the information is there. I'm not sure it's all there in the same place, easy to get.
Gotcha. Okay. Sort of analogous to CDC reporting, spikes and outbreaks and being able to get ahead of it, before the, in the old days, you had to wait 6 weeks till after the books closed and all the analytics were done to understand that 2 months ago something happened you should have responded to. That's kind of the whole thought behind it. Michael, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Bonnie, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I do think we have that information. I think that I think everybody can take it, most people take it to the next level, so it's a little bit more automated, but we do have that on a daily basis.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, one more. What kind of process do you have in place to decide where you invest capital? Bonnie, you want to respond to that one first?
I would say in any organization that I've been in, it's not been, as beautiful as I think we would all like it to be. But we have an annual capital process, and everybody, asks, and then it kind of gets vetted and down. I think some of the best processes I've seen is when you really match strategics and the initiatives of what you need, and that's really a facilitation. Outside of figuring out the exact capital, I think that our work on the cash projection and the forecasting 5-year plan, and then our liquidity model that we're looking at every week, tracking cash, that building out into a more beautiful state. So we're always aware of what we're going to spend on capital. So it's more like the treasury side. Again, manual and working on some automation between Adaptive and Workday. But deciding who gets what they ask for, I leave that to operations, you know.
I would echo it's a finite number. You guys kind of need to figure out how best to utilize it.
So let me follow up on that one, Rob. So COVID has made the business side rethink how much needs to be done remote, in the hospital versus remotely. I'm curious if either of you have had discussions with your management team about sort of the impact on telemedicine and whether that impacts your capital structure, right? So just common sense would say, don't need as much hospital space if I'm parsing out pieces of the care that can be done remotely. It may not apply to you guys, but have you guys had those high-level strategic conversations about where we might want to put our capital into more technology for at-home remote use as opposed to buildings, right? Just a thought.
Yeah, from a care perspective, we have certainly expanded our offerings. We recently expanded our telehealth presence in our facilities, so we're utilizing that at a much higher clip, and are continuing to roll that out in the next couple of months. In anticipation of that being a big part of what we utilize going forward. So absolutely, we are definitely looking towards digital care and that really improving overall care and outcomes.
We absolutely have invested in telemedicine, and in fact, I think when 100% phone, video, and telemedicine immediately with all the physician practices. So we did invest in that, and we continue to, and we do think that it is the future, and it will redesign how we deploy capital, how we build out practices, maybe how many practitioners can be in an office could be greater because there's not as many going in every day if they're doing telehealth some days. I do think it will be a new model. And we've also looked, there's been funding and grants and so forth. So we're also trying to maximize where we can for participating in those types of, again, we're trying to look at liquidity in every aspect. So it's definitely top of mind.
Okay. Michael, were there any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I just have one other question. So I know that you're both, both Communicare and Christianacare are nonprofits now, and Bonnie, you have experience in for-profit health systems. I don't know if you do, Rob, but can you talk a little bit about the difference between the for-profit world and the nonprofit world, Bonnie, in terms of kind of our discussion today and how they tackle the same challenges at UHS, for example?
So, my experience personally with working in finance is I think that I called it fundamental and discipline. So they had a very disciplined closed schedule. It doesn't matter what system you're on. And they were very regimented in that. So what that forced over the years I was there and in running that corporate finance is that it forced automation and standardization. So we were extremely standardized across our 24 hospitals at the time because the look and feel had to be exactly the same. One, so we could consolidate things easier, so that we were always, looking the same. And then we automated absolutely everything that we could. And so, and then the other thing I would say was because of that, the statements were very disciplined. The reporting was very disciplined. And I also, one thing to pick up on a lot is our productivity. So we had productivity models and our theory of how we did productivity 25 years ago when I worked there. That's better than I've seen in any other institution I've worked at since. And that was the model at the beginning of my tenure at UHS, not even at the end. They were extremely disciplined with statistics, labor standards, and productivity reporting and the system that they use. So, you know, that you have to have good productivity, you have to have good financials, you have to have good payroll information, you have to have good statistical information, which means you have to have good charging. So it makes them very lean in all the inputs that go on. So I don't know, those are a few highlights of things that I've seen that have been very different. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
You want to respond to, Rob? Or?
Sure, happy to. So I work for a couple of non-for-profits, and Communicare is actually a for-profit institution. So I can touch on that a little bit. I'd echo Bonnie's comments that you know, a lot of the same things matter. You gotta produce accurate financial statements. You got to pay your employees accurately. But I would say it's you know, the accountability at our organization, especially on the operations side, it's very strong, and people are held accountable to their jobs, and you know, and if they're not hitting their metrics, that's they have to answer that. So that's it's been refreshing, but at the same time, the care of the patients and the outcomes, you know, that's the first and foremost thing, and for-profit or non-for-profit.
Well, we are coming close to the end of our time here, and in the spirit of the U.S. election debates, I want to give both of you an opportunity to think about how, you know, with the audience out there of folks that are starting their journey or considering a journey with Workday and other systems, are there any final thoughts you want to give, words of recommendation, just in closing thoughts for our audience around their journeys, that are lessons learned from you that you want to leave them with? I'll start with ladies first again. Bonnie, I'll start with you.
No, you know, my final parting is that I think I probably still have a lot to learn about Workday. I'm new to it, and our organization is. So I think that forums like this are really quick, fast ways to learn what other people are doing, and also maybe to have a contact, so someone who's done something that you haven't. Yep. And I really think that's, you know, probably most beneficial. So my word is like just to reach out, and sometimes in 10 minutes you can learn something pretty quick. So, you know, I'm always looking for somebody who's done something that I haven't done, so I can figure out how they did it, and then I'm happy to share as well. So appreciate the opportunity to talk and share today.
Absolutely, thank you. Rob, any last thoughts?
Sure. Again, thank you for including me. And yeah, I say our organization is just beginning the Workday journey, but we're truly excited on how collaborative has helped us build Workday. And as Bounty mentioned, you know, I think it's going to be great for us, and you can continually improve, and I think that's a lot of the benefit of Workday.
Well, Rob, Bonnie, thank you guys so much. This has been enlightening. I know we're going to get some follow-up questions for you. We'll funnel them your way. Thanks for your point about building the network and finding other people in the community that can help you. It is a collaborative type, no pun intended. It is a collaborative community of people out there. Thanks again for your time. Thanks everyone on the call. We will follow up with a recording of the session. This has been great. One last housekeeping item. If you have any questions, we have folks on call, so there's a website you can hit, collaborativesolutions.com/cultivate. If you have follow-up questions, please send them in. Again, thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Rob, so much for your time, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.